Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast.
Show me the meaning!
My name is Jared.
Was that your Jack Demon baby? Show me the meaning.
I keep trying to get as close to Tom Cruise and Jerry Maguire as possible, and I feel like...
But doesn't he say it more than once?
He does, a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, okay.
So this is one of the quicker ways.
I like changing it up. Anyway, my name is Jared. I'm joined here by the Show Me the Meaning crew, who you can all already hear. We got Ryan.
Hey, film fans.
And Austin.
Yo.
And Greg.
What's up?
So today we're breaking down the new movie that came out this past weekend, The Incredibles 2, starring Helen Hunt and Craig T. Nelson, written and directed by Brad Bird. But before we go around and see what everyone talked about it, I want to ask everybody, please, if you have the time, leave us a review on iTunes. It makes a huge difference to us. It allows us to grow. It means a lot to our sponsors and everything. It makes a huge difference. So I actually want to give a shout out to a couple people who have given us a review recently. One guy named A Bucks Regular. He says, after years of enjoying Wisecrack videos, I'm really enjoying this podcast, so thank you, Bucks Regular. This is from Mars265. I enjoy the videos you guys put up on the regular. Now I can listen to you guys discuss movie themes and hidden messages. Thanks. You're welcome. And this last one is from Joseph Maltby. He says, this is a really fun way to hear different ideas about all the things your favorite movies are trying to say. I've definitely learned a lot about film and about these filmmakers from listening. Well, thank you, Joseph. We certainly try.
Thanks, Maltby.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, let's go around and what did you guys think of this movie? And also, before you say what you thought about Incredibles 2, tell us what you think about Incredibles 1 and your relationship with that movie. Let's start with Greg.
Oh, man.
Real quick, do we need to say spoilers? It's
sure.
assumed,
Yeah, all right, spoilers from now on.
Every
We're keeping
episode
it. We're keeping it. Yeah,
spoiler.
we're a spoilers
Yeah, but
company.
this is like a new film, so I feel like it's etiquette. I don't know. Fuck etiquette.
Well, how
spoiled the shit out
how
of this
about we
movie.
just keep the review section spoiler free?
Sure.
Or just like the thoughts, and then after the recap, or before the recap,
I'd
we
say
will.
let's just the
All right,
whole
fuck
thing
it.
is a spoiler.
All right. Let's stop trying. Let's just all right. Spoilers. Greg, what do you think?
Look, man. I love the Incredible franchise. I can say that now since it's 2. I think it's dope. The first one, Pixar. I'm a Bay Area dude. I like all the themes of San Francisco, but I like superheroes. I know I shit on like all the Marvel and DC movies, but I'm an animation guy. Like if you did Aquaman in animation, I'm going to the movies to watch that shit. I like people drawing shit. I like computers. I like CGI. I like all that shit. I like the story. I just dug Incredibles. I loved Incredibles 2. I loved Little Jack. I love the whole theme of it. I love the feminist theme of it, and then the backfire feminist theme of it. It was dope. I was well entertained. It's sad that it took 17. How many long? 17 years? 14 years. I'm sorry, I exaggerate. It took too long for another one, but hopefully it won't take too long for Incredibles 3. And can Frozone get a fucking movie? God damn.
Yeah.
What the fuck we got to do?
I wanted more Frozone's wife, personally.
I know we only got like 2 scenes of that. Yeah.
I do. It is kind of cool how she's only an off-screen character,
That's
though.
perfect.
Yeah.
That's how I like my black woman.
If they do make an off-screen movie, they would have to have her off-screen the whole time. That would be hilarious. Kind of like in Big Bang Theory, where was Howard's mom? Was that the character that was always off-screen? That would be awesome if they did that with his Frozone movie.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's go with Ryan next.
Love Incredibles 1. And then this one I'd say was good enough overall. I didn't love it as much, for sure. I think it kind of fell into a lot of, I'd call, sequel traps, where like the direction they took it didn't really, I feel like, expand on the first one that much. It just kind of was like another adventure. I liked a lot of it, though. Like I said, good enough. There was cool stuff in it. I left satisfied, but overall, I didn't think it had as much of the magic. Brad Bird, though, my hero. I want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
That he's an OG.
That dude's a gangster. All right. What about you, Austin?
It's so strange. I always wonder who's going to say what about their impressions of the film. I thought that this would be right up Ryan's alley. I dug it. I really liked it. I briefly was chatting about it with a buddy of mine on Facebook. I think this film may be better than the first one.
Nah.
I think it was really interesting. I thought it was thematically interesting. I thought it was hilarious. I thought some of the visuals were really clever, and they did a lot of things where they like kind of scaled up a little bit, like they would do, like you tend to see in action sequels, right? Like it's more destruction or more damage, and then in some ways it was very restrained too. So I don't know. I really dug it.
All right, so I am on the same wavelength as Austin, and I think that I like this more than the first one, only because, similar to with The Matrix Reloaded, like, this movie is fucking smart and profound, and I think it's the message of this film, I think, is so important for today, about what it says about media, about what it says about the way that we interact with screens, and ultimately what it even says about superheroes. Austin, did you happen to see the quick take we released today on it?
I did. I watched it before I went to sleep. And it's so funny because I literally tweeted, "Screenslaver was right, don't at me," before I saw the quick take. And there was kind of some interesting musings. Wasn't that the title of the video? Like, was the villain
Yeah, maybe
right
I plagiarized
like
you.
That?
I don't know.
It's all good, brother. In the era of meta-modern internet mixing, it's all free.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that all the things I liked about the first one, this one had. I mean, I love the family. I actually really like Violet's subplot a lot.
Yeah.
I liked all the awkward boy moments with her, and there's really nothing that I didn't like about it. And then the villain Screenslaver is so interesting. And once again, I think that the message or the overall conceit around the conflict surrounding him is the most relevant thing that we could be talking about in 2018.
Her. Screensaver.
Her.
Right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Screenslaver, what?
Her.
Screenslaver's a
It's a
girl.
woman.
Oh, did I say he?
Yeah.
She's
Well,
a
the pizza
female.
delivery man that she brainwashes,
Okay.
or I don't know. Yeah, it's hard for me to. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. Okay, so let's go into a quick recap. Seconds after the end of the first film finds the Incredibles facing off against the Underminer, who gets away, leaving the Incredibles exposed and the public angry about the collateral damage. As a result, the problematic nature of supers is catapulted into the news cycle, and things are looking dismal for the Incredibles. Until Frozone comes to them with an offer from billionaires Winston Deber and his sister Evelyn, who plan to use their media empire to change the public's perception of supers and eventually change the law outlawing them. Helen is recruited to be the public face of supers under Dever's new initiative, while Mr. Incredible struggles with taking care of Violet's boy problems, Dash's math problems, and Jack's budding badassery. Helen comes face to face with Screenslaver, who uses screens to hypnotize people in an attempt to ruin the public image of supers. It's later revealed that Screenslaver is actually Evelyn mind-controlling a pizza delivery man, and her mission is to reverse the intent of her brother's efforts and undermine the validity and benevolence of supers by mind-controlling them and broadcasting them doing horrible things. When Bob, Helen, and Frozone fall under Evelyn's hypnosis, it's up to Dash, Violet, and Jack to save the day. In the end, the Incredibles thwart Evelyn's plan, the law gets reversed, and Evelyn goes to jail. But, as Violet notes, she'll probably only be there for about 2 years since she's rich. End of movie. All right, so let's start this conversation talking about the villain, Screenslaver. What did you guys think of Screenslaver?
I thought Screenslaver was dope. I thought it was a good villain. I like the whole brainwashing aspect of it. One thing that I felt like during the Screenslaver scenes, it was so much going on that I really couldn't focus on the words that he was saying. I mean, that she was saying. I know she was talking about a lot about the themes of, this is our problems. We watch too much of this, and I heard her. I was watching so much of the graphics and what was going on instead of really listening to the words.
I agree. That's why, Jared, when you said that it's a really important message, I kind of felt like it was a pretty like cliche-ly conveyed message. Because it sounded like a bunch of
Gibberish.
kind of. Yeah, like stuff that sounded important, but I couldn't really. I was trying to follow it, and I think at the end of the day, I do think I got what the whole point of the thing was. But I want to know what you feel like the point of the her mission is.
All right, so what I think that this movie is about is it's about not only is it's about mediated images.
Yeah.
It's about the image of superheroes and the idea how like perception, exactly. So, at the beginning we learned that the superheroes were taken down by a PR problem. The public perception of superheroes was formed by the images of them that circulate in the media. So like basically Winston says to them like the images that you see on the screen of superheroes surrounded by destruction is what condemns them. The fact that they were trying to stop this destruction is irrelevant. They were associated with it, thus people viewed them negatively. So on one level, this is just basically like, okay, yeah, it's just PR, right? Like the importance of PR, the very cynical, like hyper-relevance of PR in that it's almost more important than reality. So Winston wants to revamp the superhero brand by creating like a curated reality of superheroes to be consumed by Americans. It's also very relevant that this media mogul can basically change a law within like 2 months, not by lobbying, but by just showing images, by basically just like using your media empire to show people. And in that sense, like what Screenslaver does by hypnotizing people is kind of done less literally by Winston, in the same way that I could say that all the people that have those goggles on are hypnotized to do whatever they're saying. We could say the same thing about all the people watching TV who all of a sudden see Helen on a bike saving the day, which is what she's always done. But now because it is on a screen and being, communicated to the masses through mass media, they're being brainwashed just as much. And now you could argue that, but they're being brainwashed into accepting a positive message because the Incredibles truly are positive people. But I think that's missing the point. The point is that people are manipulated by these mediated images, and the actual reality of it is not really relevant. And one of the most interesting parts about this is that there's a part in the movie where Evelyn and Helen are arguing. I don't remember what they're at, like some sort of a party, or like they're where the other superheroes are like being introduced, and I don't even know how they get into this conversation, but it seemed like kind of this thematic thing that was just placed where Evelyn asks Helen, like, what's more important, the selling of an object or the actual object itself? And they argue about this.
I thought that was a really interesting scene. And it was really cool when Helen is like, selling's actually more important. And you don't expect the protagonist to say something like that, because that's usually not in a movie. See, that kind of comes down to, like, Brad Bird's pretty business. I mean, he's a pretty right-wing guy. I don't know if that comes through to you.
I don't. Well, the interesting thing is we talked about that in the first one. I don't really think that this is like a right wing or even like a. The reason why I like this so much is because, as some of you know, I'm like a technophobe. I am like. There's a reason I don't have fucking Twitter. I think that like most internet technology is really bad for us, and I love how this movie is a movie for kids that is giving us this critical message about how media affects us.
Yeah, I love that part too.
So basically the whole movie is basically saying that, like, look, and I also think that this isn't cynical. I think this is like post-cynical. The idea that how things seem are more important than how they are. Like the mediated image of an object or a superhero is more important than the real object or the real person. Like, I don't even think that's cynical anymore. I think that's just true.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that he acknowledges these truths, kind of like look, like there's a utilitarian aspect to selling. Like it's about persuading ideas, and it's not just exploitation. It can be used for exploitation. But yeah, I am impressed with Brad Bird putting these like pretty heavy topics in a kids movie.
So the most interesting thing about this is when this idea is then connected to superheroes. So Evelyn, who is Screenslaver, says that the reason why she's doing this and she's trying to get people to distrust superheroes is because they made her father docile. They made him think that he would be saved by superheroes instead of taking matters into his own hands and hiding in the safe room. So here I think the movie does something interesting in that there's that like epic monologue. This is what Greg was talking about. I wish I wrote down what she said, but like Screenslaver says something like, all of our meaningful experiences, like, or we don't even have meaningful experiences anymore. Like we don't go anywhere. We just watch travel shows. We don't try anything new. We just watch reality television. And I think that when Screenslaver or Evelyn then transitions this to talk about superheroes, a very interesting commentary is being made about the effect of superhero movies on us. So the movie directly asks the question, like, in the same way that Evelyn's father said, oh, superheroes will save me, so therefore he gets killed, do we not also, when we watch superhero movies through a screen, do we not also say that, like, oh, you know, I'm not going to actually try to, you know, stand up for any justice, or, you know, like, why should I need to do anything to fix the world when there are heroes out there to do it for me? And I think that, you know, we talked about in our Deadpool 2 podcast how I didn't think Deadpool was subversive at all.
Yeah.
This movie is fucking subversive because it's a movie it's a superhero movie that questions the possibly harmful effect of superhero movies. And I think at the end, when Violet says, you know, like, we have this happy ending, you know, the law is reversed, the Incredibles save the day, Evelyn gets thrown in jail, but then Violet says, like, yeah, but she's rich. She's only going to get 2 years in jail. And I think the movie's asking us to say that, yes, we're tempted to think that, oh, man, superheroes save the day. We can all go home and eat Cheetos and fall asleep and think that the world is all good. But the truth is, Violet's hinting at the fact that, nope, don't let these superhero images make you docile like they did Evelyn's father. There's still injustices out there, and this movie should not keep you docile.
Well, but do you? I mean, are you implying that our in real life addiction to superhero movies makes us think that somehow that there's actually superheroes?
No.
Like...
So I'm going to bring. Bill Maher made this argument that I don't necessarily agree with, but it's one that can be made. He made this argument like about a year ago. He was lamenting the fact that superhero movies have basically dominated movies in the box office, and it's kind of a leap of logic, but he made the argument that, like, you know, he made the possible argument that if we worship superheroes, then we might worship somebody, this strong individual, to solve all our problems, and then an image of Trump comes up.
I feel like that's such a stretch, though.
I would agree.
Yeah.
But I think that the idea... Do we really think that there's people with superpowers? No, but we might think that, like, there are benevolent individuals out there, and that's the key word, individuals. You know, instead of what really causes change, what really causes, you know, progress to be made is people coming as a collective, as a group, and coming together. And I think that you could argue that when we worship superheroes, we believe that, no, it's all about the individual. The individual is going to save us.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing. Like, when I've talked about whether or not there are superheroes of the left or anything like that, this really gets to the heart of it. It's about a community that is transforming the social system itself, right? Or a community of people coming together and somehow living in cooperation to change the way that social life is lived. And the problem with so much of superhero ideology is that it isn't about that. It's about maintaining the status quo, because the status quo is never ultimately changed. I shouldn't say never, but it's very rarely ever changed. And it's always reactionary to that, because it's about, like, this one person's individual quote unquote moral fiber, but it's really like some enhanced super moral fiber. Either they're committed to it, like some sort of cause, or they have some sort of duty bound imposition that's imposed upon them to change the system, because to whomever, you know, great gifts is given or great powers given comes great, blah blah blah, right? So there is this like symptomatic, like, docility that it instills into the communities of Gotham, into the communities of San Francisco and shit like that, because they're simply passive observers. And so the question is like, can you still have a superhero genre film that breaks outside of that breaks outside of, you know, these individuals who are these exceptions, who are reactive to these aberrations within the people in society? They just want to, or we could say we're still kind of doing something within the superhero genre, but at the same time we were challenging that very framework itself and trying to say, look, what if we actually did try to change our system? What if we actually rose up together and didn't outsource our problems to other individuals, but we kind of took that power onto ourselves as a collective community and started changing the way that the world is? And I think that's the kind of crux of the issue. And all the other stuff is really just kind of a symptom of that being the crux of the issue.
See, I kind of half agree with you guys and half disagree. I do think that there is kind of this, the part I disagree with is that I don't think that this is an anti-individualism movie. Like the kind of like in the first movie, they still talk about the, you know, like, hey, we're gifted, exceptional people that we shouldn't be restrained by society. You know, which I do think is.
Well, isn't that
affects Brad Bird, but
right? But isn't that so interesting? How maybe it's like a reversal.
See, what I do think, yeah, and it is interesting, and that's why I think that it's almost like I feel like the superheroes are kind of a metaphor for very gifted people in society, and it's almost like I feel like in the last episode we talked about him being an objectivist. You know, I feel like this is like a reverse Atlas Shrugged situation where it's like the quote unquote normal, unexceptional people have to go, God, we can't just rely on these super exceptional people to pull us out of every bind we get in. We gotta pull together too. You know,
well, the interesting thing is they don't actually show that. You know, it's weird how.
They also don't show people being brainwashed, really, aside from them being actually brainwashed. But in terms of, I wish there was more people watching game shows and not playing games or
there's
whatever.
An interesting part where, like, you know, right before Jack fights the raccoon, he only does so because he just saw on the television screen, he saw,
that's true.
Right.
He saw a criminal with a mask that made him look like a raccoon, and then he looks outside the screen and he says, "Oh, look, a raccoon," and then he starts fighting him.
Sorry, I interrupted
learned
you.
behavior.
What were you going to say, though?
Well, it's learned behavior. So many people say that, you know, art imitates life, or that art is like a reflection of life. And I think that that's actually a really simplistic way of looking at it. There's like this dualistic, symbiotic, co-constitutive relationship where, in some ways, art is a reflection of the human experience. But at the same time, we also imitate what we see on TV. I mean, how many people live over dramatic Kardashian wannabe lives because they see the images on the screen that they want to emulate? And one of my fears and one of my wonders is how deep does that tendency towards imitation of the images that we're fed on the screens actually run in actually constituting the way that we think about the world and the way we feel. And I sometimes I sit back and I'll be in social settings and I'll sit back and I'll be like, you guys are all fakers, man. You are saying the same shit that you saw on Love Island or The Bachelor or some bullshit drama TV show. I'm like, that doesn't seem real, man. You're manufacturing some bullshit drama to make your lives more interesting, you know? And I wonder sometimes, how deep does that shit run? And this is actually where, even though I think that Screenslaver was right, I actually disagree with him or her to an extent. Because I think that, and here's the question too, real quick before we go, like, where does Screenslaver end and Evelyn begin? Like, is the pizza delivery boy's identity, because she doesn't continue that same sort of attack once the pizza delivery boy is arrested. The identity and her purpose, or at least in the forefront, seems to shift. Like, no longer is she bad-mouthing our docility because we're attached to screens and because we live through mediated images, but now it's much more just like a classic revenge story at that point.
But, I mean, if it was just a classic revenge story, then she would want to kill the supers, but she doesn't. She wants to tear down their image so that they will never be able to, like...
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
PR wars.
And
right, exactly.
That's right, and that's right, and it is ultimately based on the effects that the mediated images had on her parents that caused their death because they were passive instead of, like, just being practical and going down into the safe room or whatever. Okay, that makes sense.
All this is making me like the movie a lot more, by the way.
What if the
See,
movie,
dude, this
though...
is what happens when you get together with homies and talk about shit. You're like, man, I didn't like Matrix Reloaded, and they're like, well...
Has that been sitting with you better, Austin?
Matrix Reloaded?
Yeah, a lot, man.
Okay, cool.
Not me. No, I mean, since you guys have been talking about, like, the Hollywood aspect of it with these superhero movies and the effect on regular viewers, what if the movie was actually talking to Hollywood and saying that these superhero movies, I know they're going to sell, but they are making us weak. They're making Hollywood weak. You're making these movies, you know, people are hypnotized by these movies, you're making so much money, but the real talented movies that we aren't creating, we're not doing anything with, and we're depending on these movies. We're becoming weak because of these movies that we just keep pushing out, and sooner or later the audience is going to get tired of these movies. So maybe that, you know, maybe the movie was was shifted
A
towards
cautionary tale for
Yeah,
Hollywood.
for Hollywood.
I think
Instead
there's
of-
something in there. I think that it's probably too subtle for most people in Hollywood that make decisions to get it.
Yeah,
But no, I agree. Let me ask you guys, like, when Violet said that line about, like, oh, well, she's probably just going to be out into here because she's rich, like, how did that affect you? Because I didn't know what to think about it at first.
It kind of like I was saying before, it made me think that Brad Bird, who wrote the whole movie,
Right.
mind you, he's real. He keeps it real, and it made me go, wow, that's in a kid movie. I'm glad that they're really acknowledging that the villain isn't gonna stay,
It's rare that
incarcerated.
any superhero movie that is building up to its happy ending, like basically in the resolution, less than a minute before the movie ends, she says like, "Yeah, we didn't really make much of a difference. The system still sucks."
Yeah, it's
You know,
crazy.
that's crazy.
I thought it was weird. I was like, well, why did she say that?
Yeah,
'cause-
like I was trying to have a good
I
time.
was like, yeah.
Killed my
I was
buzz.
like calculating in my head. I was trying to think. I was like, wait a second. What did she do? And then I'm like, wait, would she really get out? And I found myself sitting there actually thinking like, even if you're that rich, maybe she'll go away for like 10 years or something. And they're like, oh, maybe not. I was like, I don't fucking know.
Should be in a white collar.
she's kind of been the moral compass of this movie, though, a little bit.
Violet,
Yeah.
yeah, she was my favorite character in this movie. She was awesome.
And how in the beginning, the dude was like bigging her up, like, yeah, she's so confident now, and like, he was really into her. Tony,
Tony.
yeah.
So in terms of me saying that I think that this is a really, really important message, I hope that this message gets out to people, because obviously in the age of fake news, post-fact, it's really important for people to be skeptical of things that they see in the media, or just like be able to recognize that there is a disparity between how things seem through images when you see an object on the TV and the actual object. And that's why I want to give Brad Bird like a fucking Nobel Prize for, in the same way that when we discussed Inside Out, we talked about like how it's so awesome that these days you can have a kid who's too scared to jump off the diving board, but then he says to himself, now wait, the fear is just like this thing in my mind that is informing me not to do something, but I can choose to usurp that. Like the idea that a 4-year-old kid can conceive of that after watching Inside Out is awesome, and I'm hoping that this movie will have a similar effect on kids, in which they'll actually be able to be critical about images, because unfortunately these images, whether it's on your phone, on your TV, in a movie theater, it ain't going away.
But do you think it was too deep?
Go ahead, Greg.
No, well, all right. I just want to we can pick this up, but do you think the kids will be able to see through it like that?
No,
I
but,
think it was
but
too-
I don't know. Maybe on some level.
Yeah.
And here's another thing. When I said earlier, it's kind of cliche. I mean, maybe I just consume too much media, but I feel like for like 6 years I've been hearing people say, God, people are just looking at their phones too much.
Yeah.
Complaining.
Right.
I guess it's always going to be with us, like that complaint, but kind of at this point I'm like, just shut the fuck up. We all get it. Everyone's on their phones. It sucks, but it's our reality. I mean...
Right, so at that
so
point,
here's
all you
where-
can do is imbue a critical
Sure,
disposition
yeah,
and say,
I mean,
like, all right, if
I'm
you're
not
going to be
saying
on your
stop saying
phone,
it.
at least be aware
Yeah,
that
exactly.
you're not, like it's not reality that you're consuming, and that
Right.
you need to be critical about these things.
Agree.
So here's where Screenslaver is wrong, though, is that the implication is sort of nostalgic, that somehow there used to be a time when we were connected to the real, but now we're not, because we're just connected to mediated images. And I would argue that that itself is a nostalgic fantasy for a time that never was. Now, Baudrillard, who a lot of people, and you in the video, compared Screenslaver to, and I don't think you couldn't make that comparison. He literally is kind of a parody of certain understandings of Baudrillard. And Baudrillard does think that there was a time of what he calls symbolic exchange, where we didn't live through this era of virtuality or hyperreality, or the kind of just radical proliferation of mediated images.
It's called the
And in his-
caveman days, right?
Well, yeah, it is basically like in primitive societies, as he would have said, or in like The Savage Mind, which is a book by Claude Lévi-Strauss. I know the term kind of sucks, but he's writing in like the 50s when they weren't as quote unquote woke as we are now. Or Baudrillard would call like indigenous societies maybe as well. But yeah, it was a time prior to the emergence of certain modes of exchange based on currency or under conditions of capitalism and things like that. But Baudrillard he did believe that there may have been this time of symbolic exchange where you really were engaging with the real. But most people don't think of it that way. Most people are familiar with Baudrillard's later work, in which he's just talking about like simulation and things are just copies of copies of copies, and we live in this sort of like alienated, simulated existence. And that the problem for me with that is that it's I don't know if there's ever a time when we are connected to the quote unquote real, because I think that language ultimately separates us from being able to access the real as it is in itself.
Right, but
Does
that's
that
not
make sense?
No, it makes sense,
like
but that's
the
not to say that things
like-
haven't gotten worse. Can we say that?
I mean, what do you mean worse? Like, okay, so say you're
all
an
relative, bro.
indigenous person, and instead of mediating our experience through superhero images, we're mediating our experience through the oral traditions of the Gilgamesh tale, right? And so I go out and I'm trying to do something, and it starts raining, and now I start thinking about Gilgamesh or Noah or whatever fucking flood story, or the story of my peoples, or I'm doing something because I'm anticipating my acceptance into the community through the religious rites or the oral rites or the rites of passage or whatever. And so I'm still mediating my experiences through these memories, through these images in my mind. The difference is they're not externalized.
And so I think that the difference is convenience, is that through screens, like the ability for us to get that dopamine hit and to, like forget a problem is just increased when like literally on our phone we have infinite amounts of hours of distraction. So like, yes, I agree with your point, but I think that like the docility is increased with technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm making a somewhat academic point where I'm trying to say, hey, let's not fool ourselves into thinking that somehow we had it better at some point and that we've lost it. I do agree with you. I do think there's a difference, but I would say it's a difference more of degree than a difference of kind. That's the only thing I would say. And
Well, that's what I'm saying. Worse, better. So it is degree.
Yeah, maybe. I just don't know. Again, even worse though, it's making like a value judgment. Is it worse?
I think it's worse just because it's in our hands. Like we could get away at one point. We could go outside and we'll see billboards and shit like that, or music on the radio. But now this shit is like basically attached to us. We got watches. It's everywhere. You can't get away from it.
Yeah, that's true.
The idea that post-fact is now something that people know about, that's like outside of academic circles, that it's like that it's inundated our reality. Obviously this is worse, right? than before. Now you could argue that we never had that access to reality, but the fact that it's so obvious now that facts are these things that no one can even agree on anymore, that has to be a worse degree, right?
Well, but before, facts were controlled and concentrated by a small group of people, and maybe we were just ignorant to this supposed illusion of truth that we were living under then. So, this is something that Chomsky talks about in his book Manufactured Consent, which was probably written at like the shift between kind of what we think of now as being like this just radical age of proliferated mediated images. But still, his point was that there are like 4 or 5 small companies that are dictating the news that gets disseminated to the thousands of other local newspapers or the hundreds of other big papers around the world. But they're all saying the same thing. They're all mediated, collated images that are, edited carefully according to the interests of big capital or to these big, large conglomerates. Okay, why is weed illegal in America? Weed is illegal in America.
It's bullshit, man.
Because the newspaper magnates were afraid that hemp was going to be used to replace paper, and because of other various reasons. So again, the narrative has always been manipulated by the interests of those who are in power. Okay, then let's go back further. Why was the Catholic Church selling indulgences that led to the Protestant Reformation? Because they were the ones that had control of the power, both property power, but also knowledge power. What was true, what was not true, how was truth determined? Here are the keys to kingdom and your happiness, and otherwise you're going to be enslaved unless you fucking, are a good Catholic and you donate your money and you give your money and you pay for the dead souls of your lost loved ones or whatever. So there's always been this, right? I'm just skeptical of this, like we're worse now. We had it better before. I think humans are just fucked, basically.
I agree with Jared that we're worse, but I don't agree that I agree for different reasons. The reason that it's worse now, because I do think that it's always been kind of a post fact, like perception's always been reality for forever.
Sure.
But it's so bad now because it's so transparent that it works on everybody. Like because with the internet we can see it. You know, Donald Trump is a perfect example. It's like everyone, you know, there's a whole big part of the population that's just like, what the fuck? How did all this? How did he persuade you? You know what I mean? Like, and it must be fake news or whatever. And so I think it's the machine that we can all see is happening. We're all helpless and hopeless to stop it. And when, you know, on an individual level, when you talk to an individual, you know, it doesn't seem that bad, but then you look at the data and the statistics, the big data, and you're like, God, we're fucked, kind of. You know?
So that's an analogy for the movie. It's a machine and
like
you can't stop it.
A little bit.
Okay. All right.
The difference is between what Jared's boy Zizek says is the difference in the shift in ideology.
You just throw me under the bus, bro.
No, man, there's nothing wrong with that, man.
Can't let your academic friends know that you like the Zhizh.
Hey, man, I love me some Zizek, man.
Okay.
But it used to be we don't know that we're doing it, yet we do it, right? That's what ideology is for psychoanalysis or for sort of like post-Marxist thinking, right? It's like you don't realize that you're doing it, but you're doing it anyway. That's ideology. But then he says, but now that's not what ideology is. Now is we know that we're doing it, but we're doing it anyway. And that's what Ryan's talking about. It's like we're in it and we just sit there and throw our arms up in resignation and say, fuck it, we're going to do it anyway. Even though we know it's stupid, we know it's banal, we know it's damaging, we know it's alienating, but fuck it, we do it anyway. That's kind of the difference there. And that might be even more problematic than the we were unaware, but we were doing it. Sort of version of ideology.
You could say that the message of this movie is largely that. It's like, all right, so we're recognizing that superhero movies have a perhaps negative effect on people, but we're doing it anyway because this is what you guys want.
A little bit. It's the moneymaker.
So I want to transition this conversation to nostalgia. So in the last podcast, we talked about The Incredibles 1, and we talked about how the film was like pro-nostalgia, that it affirmed nostalgia, or the old school, that by the end of the movie, we had those two old guys who were saying, that's old school, ain't no school like the old school, and we're all like, oh man, things went back to the way they were in like the 60s or whenever the opening of The Incredibles came up.
Or as Austin says, the times that never were.
Everything has always sucked. So in this one, there's one point where Frozone says to the Incredibles, he's like, hey, you guys should wear your old suits because Winston is nostalgic. What did you guys think of that?
I thought that was a weird line, too. I always, watching this movie, I'm like, I'm missing something. It just felt like a lot of stuff was going over my head. But yeah, I thought.
Well, did you forget that they had individual identities before they got married? That like because that's the opening scene in the first one, right?
No.
Elastigirl.
I remember
the wedding.
Yeah, I remember that. But I mean, when he said that part, it did bring it back up. But I was like,
yeah,
who's this? It just made me wonder about this guy. It made me not trust the brother and sister automatically.
Well, yeah, it definitely seemed like a weird foreboding line, but then I don't feel like did it ever really come back again?
No, I mean this is an open question. I don't really have an answer here.
Yeah, because now that you bring that up, it seems like since they didn't bring it back, it seems like it is probably some sort of commentary, right, on nostalgia.
But it could be to Austin's point that, I mean, if we are to think that The Incredibles 2 is a reversal of The Incredibles 1, it could be that whereas The Incredibles 1 was like, okay, there are certain things that are better in the past, let's affirm nostalgia. This one is like, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess we need to ask ourselves, no matter how good his intentions are to allow supers to exist in the world, is it just that he wields too much power? You know what I'm saying? So like, so like Winston, he's not the bad guy, he's not Evelyn, but what is he?
He's dumb.
He's a pawn in her
much.
system, in her game.
Is it like, was it her idea? Do we ever learn that?
Yeah, remember, because they have the reverse view of that moment when their dad got killed. Remember?
Right. Yeah.
And
but they both have the same philosophy in that we will change reality or we will change the world through our media empire because everything is about perception.
So you're saying who is the seed of the idea?
I don't think no, I'm really just asking, Evelyn is bad, but is Winston necessarily good? Because, I mean, it's just like...
Yeah, I think he's good. He's the salesman.
But I'm just asking, like, does he not wield just too much power? Like, it's just almost like a good. First of all, I think there's a question to be asked. Like, now that supers are legal, is that good? And once again, it's just a coincidence that he wants to do something good. The real reality here is that Winston just decides one day, he's like, oh, I want to create a PR campaign to change a law, and he just fucking does it, and within 2 weeks the law's changed.
He doesn't just decide it; he does it to help because of his dad.
Well, whatever. That's his own personal thing. Like, who gives a? He could have a dog that died.
It was a very interesting story structural thing. It was very interesting, because they do all this foreshadowing thing. You think he's a bad guy, and then oh no, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Remember, he definitely is helping out with the resistance, to Evelyn and stuff at the end.
I know, but the point is that that's just his opinion, and now just whatever he wants to do. Like, if I wanted to change a law that makes it so that people in California all have to have gold toilets, like, and I was him,
and he's breaking the law to do
it. I could fucking do it just because, like, because as Winston proves, public opinion is very easily manipulated by the media.
I think they got real political at that point. I think they were like saying Republican, Democrat right there. You're still playing on the same team. You know what I mean? Like, both of these guys are fucking rich. They talk shit to each other, but they're eating dinner at the same restaurant the tables next door to each other. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I like about this movie is that, like, it's like this is a problem for everybody.
Yeah.
Republican, Democrat, whatever.
Totally.
Well, I mean, it was so blatant how exuberant and how rich he was, right? Like, their building is fucking above the clouds. Mm-hmm. The house that's one of his many houses that they focus on him and they intentionally have him saying is ridiculously insane. The yacht that all the superheroes meet on is fucking ridiculous. And it seemed that they really did focus on the sort of outlandishness of his wealth, and then tied that to that wealth leads to power and how he's able to get things done because he has so much wealth. And I think that's what Jared's saying. Jared's saying, well, if I wanted to change the laws right now, I couldn't change the laws. But if I'm Elon Musk, I can sure as fuck change some laws.
That's the point. Like, is someone evil just because the amount of power that they have? Should someone not just have this much power, even if they're doing good?
It's like George Soros and the Koch brothers. It's
sure.
Are they doing good or bad? They think they're trying to spread persuade their ideology, but other people think, they're taking advantage. Right. But what I would say is that I look back at that conversation at the dinner table, right, where they're all like talking about laws, and Mr. Incredible's like, look, just because it's a law doesn't mean it's a good thing, which is a fair point, and so I think that that's taking it to the extreme. You have this Elon Musk figure who can say, well, what do I want to put my money to? I want to change this law that's important to me. I think Brad Bird is just bringing up this ethical question that you're bringing up right now, but I don't think they really answer it because, like you say, money can be used for good, money can be used for evil, like to get you out of jail when you're an evil piece of shit. Basically, the point of the movie, it's a big take on rich people can get away with fucking anything.
It's like Austin said, we're all fucked. Right?
It's not we're all fucked. It's just that you're way less fucked if you're rich.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
You only
get 2 years in jail, like Violet says.
Is, what's that, brother?
I said you only get 2 years in jail, like Violet says.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think that it's a pretty heavy-handed theme. I don't think that it's subtle at all. I think that it's pretty clear throughout. I don't think we're doing a deep read on that. I mean, the wealth that is on display and the power that is on display isn't something that they're tiptoeing around. I think they're actually trying to say, look, this is an essential theme of the kind of designing principles of this film, and it's really about whoever has the money has the power and controls the narrative. And the fact that what's his name again? The rich dude? Winston. The fact that Bob Odenkirk is able to, or Better Call Saul, is able to just shift the way that perception is viewed because he has control of knowledge power is quite frightening. So we might say, oh man, maybe it is better. He's changing a dishonest narrative into a more honest narrative because now we can look at body cams and we can live this like virtual experience and we're more immersed. Now we have the truth. But the question is it the truth or is it just another form of manipulated image, just under the conditions of a different power structure? Whereas before it was the news media and now it's this other guy who thinks that he somehow has the based on his nostalgic love for superheroes on what it means to really disseminate truthful images, which is quite, again, problematic, which is something that I think we should think through, because it's something that exists in our own world, you know, that it is true, like you're talking about Soros and the Koch brothers, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's just the fact that the Koch brothers are throwing their money around and manipulating college curriculums.
I don't believe you, Austin. I don't believe you're not a conspiracy theorist at all.
George Soros paid you to say
I don't
that.
believe you, bud.
You know.
How much
Sounded a little bit when you
did
said
George
that.
Soros pay you to say that, Austin?
I mean, listen, I'm traveling the world, right, homie? You want to know how I fund myself? No, Noam Chomsky says it's not a conspiracy theory when two rich men in suits get into a room behind locked doors and shake hands and make an agreement. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just two motherfuckers with power saying this is how we're going to make more money. So
I think we can contextualize this as an interesting. If we think about the first one, and the message of the first one, as we talked about in our last podcast, is that exceptional people ought to be able to exercise their power, right?
Amen, motherfucker.
But what about
Right.
rich? Like, are rich people like Winston not also?
Look,
or Evelyn, is she not also exceptional? She is, you know, like, I mean, in the movie, they just inherited their wealth. That
Exactly.
they make that very clear.
Yep.
Well, and we need to be clear that that's actually the way that most wealth is disseminated. I mean, there is tons of literature out there that demonstrate that this idea of social mobility, first of all, in the United States, it's actually far less possible than it is in other OECD nations around the world. We're actually we're the most unequal top-tier developed nation in the world, for one, but also we're one of the worst nations in the developed world with regards to social mobility. So this idea that, you know, you can become anything you want actually doesn't fit the statistics at all. You're actually kind of hardened into the tier into which you're born. But that also means
caste
that
system.
people... No, you might not like that ideologically, but in terms of the facts,
No, but you
this
can
is
do
just-
it though. It's not that a lot. I agree
possible.
that a lot of people don't do it, and I also agree that a lot of people give their wealth, but that doesn't mean that it's not very possible
It
to
is.
be mobile in this society.
Just
it's not that it's
you
not
can turn off
possible.
the water machine in the Matrix Reloaded.
Right. It's not that it's not possible, but it's that according to the statistics that we have on file that are as reliable as possible in the United States, social mobility is far less likely. It happens less often, and there are more obstacles to social
All
mobility.
right,
Right, but
well,
that's a fudge of those
we're
statistics.
getting off topic.
You know,
Okay,
I
so
like it though.
So, all right. So Winston got he inherited his money, but the point is that I think the more I'm thinking about this, I do think that The Incredibles 2 is an inversion of The Incredibles 1.
Yeah.
Because The Incredibles 1 said that, okay, if you're exceptional, you should be able to express your exceptional powers, and if you don't, society will suffer. This one is saying that if you are exceptional or in an exceptional position of power, like Winston, if we do allow these people to express their powers, it could be a fucking problem, like Evelyn.
Well, it also is like, it doesn't matter how exceptional you are. It's just the perception of your exceptionalism is a
Well,
is
no,
a big
because
deal.
Evelyn and Winston have cold, hard power. They control,
Because of their money.
They control perception. They're more. Yeah. Well, it's not only their money. I think it's their money and the fact that they are media moguls.
Yeah.
That they can control
Yeah,
perception.
technology.
Yeah. That they control the screens. They control perspective. So, in a way, these motherfuckers are way more powerful than the Incredibles will ever be.
Right, but they have bad intentions, though, like Evelyn does.
One of them, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, I don't think that they would disagree that if you have a lot of power.
Well, Evelyn would say that she has good intentions. She's trying to make people less docile. You know, she's trying to
Well,
say
Yeah,
also
that
but
makes
she's
her a
doing
good
it in
villain,
this
right?
sketchy way of creating giant disasters and stuff. I mean, she's a bad person.
Yeah, you
Hey,
can't,
you got to
can't
crack
pay
a couple
women the
eggs to
same
make
pay.
an omelet, brother.
All right, guys.
Amen, brother.
All right, I want to move into the mailbag. So we've actually got a couple questions about The Incredibles 2, so I want to address these first. So this is from Rue Brandon on Patreon.
What up, Rue?
Also, if you guys want to join us on Patreon, go to wisecrackplus.com. Anyway, so Rue Brandon says, did you guys see any themes of political libertarianism in The Incredibles 2?
Yeah, that's kind of what we've been talking
Yeah,
about a
all
little
of it.
bit, or I feel like I talked
But
about it a little.
so what did we conclude? We concluded that it's like, all right, here's libertarian message, and now we're inverting it. Now it's anti-libertarian.
It's not anti. I don't think it's anti-libertarianism. They still talk about exceptional people doing exceptional things and letting them be free to do it. But they still are saying that there's a cost to that because, like you've been saying, these people. But then also, what do the normal people? I don't mean to say normal people, but what does your average citizen who's not a superhero? How does the existence of your superhero power and the perception of it affect them, you know? And it's about how they deal with it. That's what I got out of it. So I do think that's kind of it's a weird kind of a libertarian message.
I think that there's something very cynical about the fact that in the first movie, we're like, okay, the law is unjust because the Incredibles are good people and they want to save the world. But in this one, it's not that the law doesn't get reversed because of that. The law just gets reversed because some rich guy wants it to be.
Well, but he persuaded the public with his media-ness. Media empire, I mean.
Right, but I mean the point. I maybe I'm the cynical one. I'm interested in what you think, also. But the point is, it could have been anything. He could have convinced the public of anything.
Hey, look, if you had all your money and you said, "Hey, everyone, look." Golden toilets, like you were saying before, and everyone's like, "Dude, yeah, why not golden toilets?" Yeah. There's a good chance that everyone goes, "Fuck that! Well, I don't want this. I'm not gonna sit on a golden toilet because this rich guy put a poster up." That could have been the reaction. He's just a good PR guy.
I mean, certainly not every. Yeah, but I think that perhaps what the movie is pointing to is that people, at least most people, are not very good at being are not being very good at critical of the images being critical of the images they see. So
AKA
they
easily brainwashed.
Easily on both sides.
Exactly. Easily brainwashed.
Yeah. On both sides.
Of course.
I don't think Brad Bird disagrees with that.
Yeah. I don't know if I like this movie anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it too
I
depressing?
like it more.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, just like, and then like with the graphics and the cartoon, it just makes me feel like, oh, I'm just being duped the whole time.
But don't you think it's an important message for people?
Yeah, I think so. But I just feel like with the cartoon and with the beauty of this movie and with all these underlying messages underneath it, yeah.
Get out of my head, motherfucker.
Exactly, man.
Yeah.
I feel like Bernard in Westworld. You know what I mean? Like,
delete Ford.
Get out of this, man. I just want to swim.
Can we all agree, though, that the best part of the movie was the fucking sentient dumpling short that played before the movie?
So
That
good.
shit
How
was
amazing
so
was
good.
that?
Austin, did you cry?
That was so good.
No, I didn't cry, but I
almost
did dig
cried.
it. I
It was
did
sad.
really dig it. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to be getting the
Boa? Is that what
it's bao, because the Chinese
Bao.
word for dumpling is baozi.
Homie brought a white girl home too.
I know. I thought that was funny. I saw that. I was like, of course he brings a white girl. And I was in an audience with a bunch of Asian people because in Sydney there's a shitload of Asian people.
Yeah.
And I was sitting next to this Asian dude, and I wanted to ask him. I'll be like, is that offensive? Is that a joke? Is that like an inside joke for you guys or what?
Offensive, yeah. It was beautiful, Austin.
Yeah, San Francisco all day.
I did like it better when I thought that the dumpling actually brought it home. But then, I mean, it was sweet at
Dumpling
the end,
got gay.
but I was like, man, wow.
I mean, that dumpling is so cute. I mean, it's got some a leg up. All right, so this next one is from Alan. He said, "Long-time fan, first-time caller. Just wanted to say that Screenslaver equals Ted Kaczynski, a.k.a. the Unabomber. Notice some parallels between. It would be cool if you mentioned when you do a video about it."
Yeah, the outfit for sure.
I don't know much about the Unabomber, so I can't really address this. Do you know a lot of him?
Yeah. I mean,
What is his manifest? I feel like I mean, I've heard things, but I feel like he's probably referring to when Screenslaver says we're all living inauthentic lives instead of being.
So, because Ted Kaczynski was really influenced by this movement that's called anarcho-primitivism. There's a philosopher named John Zerzan, who's a pretty well-known anarcho-primitivist philosopher, who talks about that how technology is essentially embedded within the capitalist system and leads to our alienation and things like that. And so Ted Kaczynski, obviously, he was an academic. He has like a PhD in math or some shit like that. But he was a brilliant thinker who just kind of went deep down the rabbit hole of thinking that we were living in a society that was hyper real, that was disconnected, that needed to get back to nature. That's why he went out into the woods, because anarcho-primitivism wants to argue that the solution is to actually go back. So they do have a sort of nostalgic image, even though they might say it's not about going back, it's like going forward to creating authentic realities in the future. But it is oftentimes rooted in this idea of the sort of primitive connection to the real.
Okay, yeah.
So I think,
ideology-wise, yeah. But I mean, but the Unabomber was sending bombs to government employees and stuff, which is, that's where I thought he was going.
Yeah. I think it's just the manifesto is what he's talking about. Fun piece of trivia: my sister has a friend whose father is one of the guys who defused the last Unabomber bomb.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh, shit.
He's a gangster. Anyway, so this next one is from Lee. So Lee sent us a message about his reading of the movie. I'm interested in what you guys think about this. He says that the movie is about radical atheism. He says Evelyn has a conversation with Elastigirl where she espouses that she thinks people will always lean on the easy way out. A conversation, by the way, where Elastigirl alternates between viewpoints of cynic and believer. When Evelyn reveals that she's the bad guy, it comes attached to the line, "You make us worse." She goes on to disparage her father for attempting to reach out to superheroes instead of hiding like her mother during a robbery. What she's suggesting is that her father's belief in a higher power, in this case superheroes, led him to take the easy way out and lean on the supernatural instead of taking action for himself, and this got him killed. She also criticizes her brother's naivete. She says that in his mind, superheroes went away, then mom and dad went away. Maybe by bringing back superheroes, he can bring back their parents. This seems to be arguing about the disillusionment one feels upon growing up and realizing God might just be made up. They give people an easy way out in the same way religion gives people an easy way out. As long as people think superheroes exist, they'll give up their agency to them. In other words, as long as people are believers, they are the worse for it.
Fuck, I'm taking that. I believe that now.
Thank you. On board.
Yeah, that's a good way to read this movie.
Yeah.
But I think that it's more to the point that we were bringing up earlier, in that the way that, I mean, this is taking it to a level of, like, I don't think that when people go to the movies and watch a superhero movie, they're like, literally like worshiping Christ. But I do think that there is an element of, belief in transcendent individuals that can save us all. But I don't see the religious thing as much, but I think that there's overlap with what we're trying to say.
I mean, I can see him, the dad using the phone as like, I'm praying, I'm getting on my knees and I'm using the telephone to pray to God, and God's not there, and then he gets killed. I can see that. Yeah.
It's like Christian Scientists.
Yeah, real quick too. I would love to talk to that dude. What was the dude's name?
His name was
Lee.
Lee? Yeah, that sounds Lee the atheist. What up, Lee?
Yeah, so the only thing I'd say is that I think that's an interesting take, and I'm here for it. I dig it. But the only thing I'd say is, again, Lee, let's challenge ourselves even further and let's be self-critical and think that maybe even in our non-theistic or our rejection of theism, are we actually, and this is what Jared was saying, are we actually getting to some sort of authentic material connection, or have we just displaced our worship, or what we would say in psychoanalysis, we've sublimated it or desublimated it from the attached transcendence, but we've then infused it into other images. So now we worship our TV shows, or we worship our TV heroes or our superheroes, or every time you click like, or every time you repost something on Twitter, is that an act of worship or glory? And
pretty much.
There are a lot of people that explore that the way that we used to worship and pray to Mary or pray to the saints, or that you go to church on Sunday, is now just diffused into, you go to a football match on Sunday, or you go to a basketball game, and you go to a Bieber concert, just so you get the same sort of sensationalistic emotional jouissance or release of pleasure or release of enjoyment. So I would let's just challenge ourselves and think, well, have we somehow, because we're in a post-theistic world, are we somehow free from exploitation, or have we just taken on new masters?
And see, when I see a bunch of people go into a superhero movie, I don't see people worshiping superhero Jesus. I see a bunch of people that just want to go see shit get blown up, and there's nothing wrong with that.
There's
I don't want to say that there's nothing wrong with that.
And that is ideology, motherfucker.
There's nothing wrong with that at all.
All right, so I want to read one more, and this is from JJ. It's either JJ Jesus or JJ Jesus. And this guy is a sick fuck just like me, because this guy likes to think about the Matrix. First off, JJ studied at West Point, and he's now a captain in the Army stationed in Korea. So first off, I want to say, JJ, thank you for your service.
Thank you, JJ.
Thank you.
So he says he really enjoyed the discussion about the Matrix Reloaded. He had two questions that tie into this discussion. One, in the second film, we learned that Neo and Zion, who we used to view as system-defying rebels, are actually just known variables in a larger system. We also learned that machines are subjugated to the system as well, with the most oppressed programs being regularly deleted. The real rebels, then, are actually two different machines, Smith and the Merovingian. Smith seems to be consumed by a loss of purpose and the notion that the purpose of life is to end, but he is a true unknown variable within the machine system and wants to destroy it. Similarly, the Merovingian is operating outside the system. He seems to be profiting off the oppression like a sort of mob boss, but he also helping the program seek refuge from the agents. So, thank you for this email, JJ. So to answer your first question, these are things that have also kind of confused me. So let's start with the Merovingian. The thing about the Merovingian is that, yes, I agree that he's a rebel from the system, but why he would be suffering with Smith. Let me take that again. Well, thank you for your question, JJ. Let me first start with Smith. So I agree that there is a great argument to be made here that Smith is the only one that is truly detached from any kind of system and makes his own choice. I actually think there's more validity to that fan theory, that Smith is the one, than most fan theories. But I will say the one thing that's odd about this is that during the architect scene, the architect tells Neo that if the one does not reinsert his code into the source, then the matrix will continue to decay, and then Neo says Smith, and then the architect says exactly. So I'm wondering, like, it's unclear. It seems like Smith is the one unique thing that is happening during this cycle. Now, it would make more sense if after Neo decided to save Trinity instead of reinsert his code into the source, then Smith started coming about, and then everyone's like, oh shit, this has never happened before, what do we do? But it was before that Smith started replicating himself. And so I don't really know how to take that, because it seems like Smith is part of the system because the system needs to decay because it's part of the mathematically imperfect equation. Now, the Merovingian, similarly, like, would the Merovingian not also suffer because of Smith? Like, isn't it in his best interest to keep the system going? Because otherwise, he's not going to have any criminal empire, and he's not going to be able to rebel against shit if Smith goes and, turns the entire Matrix into a bunch of Smiths. So that's kind of why I'm confused about that. Austin, Ryan, you guys have any thoughts? Greg?
I think you nailed it.
Yeah, I'm just here as a passive observer to listen to you geek out. So keep going.
All right, yeah, shit. I wish Rebecca was here. All right, so one more question from JJ. He says, in the first film, do you think the Wachowskis plant any hints at this larger system or lay any groundwork for the themes in the second film, or do you think they came up with all this after the fact? I believe they came up with it all after the fact. I think that chances are they never thought that they'd even get the movie made, never mind get to make sequels, So I think that just on a very practical level, they just tried to make the best movie they could, and then when they realized how much of a cultural impact they had, they said, all right, what's next?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think they actually had these planned.
I think
so?
George Lucas style?
Yeah, well, I don't know about the third one. I definitely think the second one, though, they already had ideas. I don't know if it was storyboarded out or...
They're half of one movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it felt like that, and how similar. Well, I guess, the second one, I didn't. Yeah, well, if we're just gonna answer the question, yes, I do think they had the second one planned out. I don't think they had the third one planned out, or if they did have the third one planned out, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't as good. I do. Think
I wonder if it's less. Yeah, I wonder if it's less conscious because we were talking last week or whatever about. That they were so successful after the first one, and then they sat down and were like, okay, fuck, well, we have to one up ourselves or whatever. And sometimes, yeah, I'm sure that's the conversation that they had. That they needed to be aware of the success they had, and then not let the expectations fall through the cracks. But at the same time, I think sometimes things are just unconscious, or they're part of who you are in your kind of being, let's say. Yeah. And so I wonder if the second and third, like the themes that came out that are more progressive or that are kind of critical, I'm not even so sure they sat down and I'm like, well, we need to now expand on these progressive political themes and make Neo a superhero of the left and think about why we think about things or whatever. I don't even know if it was that conscious, and it's much more just like, all right, we've built this world, and because of who they are in their own ideological makeup, they kind of just were saying, how can we expand on these themes in a way that is both visually stimulating, and then also has an interesting narrative and that is conceptually kind of fun as well. I mean, it's probably something more like that, I think. But so in that case, then that means that, yeah, they had it planned, but not in a formal like storyboarded sense.
It wasn't
like
written down. But you shoot some things and you're like, man, if I shot the second one, this is what I would do with this one.
Yeah, you've always got stuff going on in your head,
yeah.
like, they probably don't sleep at night, like when they were thinking about the next movie,
To your point, Austin, about the progressive thing, I mean, their first movie was a lesbian exotic thriller in like a...
Which is so good,
It's so awesome. Bound. Yeah, you got to see it, So I think that's always been in every one of their movies. In a good way,
especially Speed Racer.
It's just who they are.
Especially,
right?
I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's just who they are.
Did he make Speed?
But
just every
really?
Zack Snyder movie is going to be, infused with some objectivism and Ayn Rand. I mean, he's doing the new fucking.
He's doing the Fountainhead. He's doing the
Fountainhead. So like everything that he does, because it's just part of who you are. Those things come out. It's like a fingerprint on your artwork. You can't avoid that, or at least it's really difficult to avoid kind of imputing yourself into your piece of art. In fact, that's the point of art. Don't avoid that. Just be authentic and express yourself. And I think that's what they were doing.
Yeah, be you.
Cool, guys. Well, we're going to wrap it up. First of all, where can we find you guys on the internet? Ryan.
You can find me at Ryan's Shorts on Facebook and YouTube. And hell yeah, I love you.
You can find me at Greg the Grouch on Twitter and gregcomedy.com.
All right, and Austin.
Yeah, you can hit me up on Twitter, Austin_Hayden.
All right, hit me up on Instagram at Father Woody for some killer dog pics. And until next time, I believe next week we're getting really bad at remembering at picking the movies beforehand, because we had something planned and then it got reshuffled. So I don't know what we're doing next week, but we'll put it on Twitter or something so you guys will be informed. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you later. Thanks, guys.
Peace.
Goodbye from Hollywood, California.